What's up, everyone? This is a tournament breakdown presented by Midway USA. So you can thank them for kind of bringing this extra content to you guys. This is just separate from the BMP Fishing, the series videos, where we kind of dive into the actual baits, techniques, and how I broke down Lay Lake this week for a second place finish by a mere 2 ounces. You can watch the full tournament series either before or after this video, depending on when you're seeing it. So I'm going to go through kind of the 3 main setups this week, with one of them being the key player, but I got to give credit to a couple of the other baits. So we're going to start off with El Chito. We named him Cheeto this week as a little Booyah Pad Crusher Junior. I think they call it pumpkin seed, but that bright orange out there, when it was walking back and forth, it just looked like a little Cheeto puff swinging back and forth. So we nicknamed him Cheeto. Cheeto did play this week. I have to give him credit. 2 of the fish I weighed did come on this. I kind of would, going through my area, if I wasn't in one of kind of the key little sections where I was throwing the drop shot, I would cast this around the edges of the gator grass and the willow grass, you know, like little shade pockets, just anywhere that I thought a bass might live, where I couldn't access them very well with a drop shot or a jerk bait. So he did end up playing. I weighed one. I caught a fish late. Day number 1, that was a 2.95 that I ended up weighing. That was my smallest fish that day. And then I believe day 2, I weighed a 2.16 on this little dude. So he did play. It was super fun bite. I love throwing this little frog, but you have to throw it on the right setup, or else it's just too much. If you try to throw it on a regular frog rod, it's just too small, I think. So I throw it on an Alpha Angler Power Skip. So it's a little bit shorter rod. It's a 611 medium heavy. It's got a really good little tip that allows you to walk this bait and be able to cast it really well, but it has a great backbone so that if a big one bites it, you still have enough power and leverage to get those fish out. So it's been really fun. This is the same setup I threw at Neely Henry a couple years ago when I think we finished 14th there. We were throwing same little frog, different color, but same little frog, throwing it on a Daiwa Steez A 7.1 to 1 and 50-pound Seagar Smackdown in Stealth Gray. And that's just a super smooth braid that allows you to cast it and get that bait to walk really well, get the distance out of it. And I like the Steez A with those flatter knobs. It gives you a lot of power and castability with that. So that was super fun. I'm gonna dive in. I'm gonna skip and go to day number 4 before we get into the meat and potatoes. So day number 4, I ended up kind of getting on this little bit of a shad spawn, and it happened later. I was kind of catching the tail end of it, I guess. But what I noticed on my Mega 360 Mega Live is that there were these little pods of fish that had pushed this bait. So there was a ditch that ran in. It was kind of the main channel that ran in, and it kind of ran into this flat. So where that flat ran off, it made a little drop into that ditch, and they had all that bait kind of corralled in the back corner of that ditch. And there was 2 isolated stumps and like little isolated grass patches that the bass were using as ambush points. So there was actually schools of bass on these tiny little, I mean, they weren't much bigger than that big around, that there were actually schools of bass hanging around. And I pitched a drop shot at them and they'd kind of react, but they would never bite it. So I pulled out 110. It's a Mega Bass Vision 110 in Edo Wakasagi. It's one of my favorite semi-stained watercolor color patterns. You can see how it's got this half tone where it has the chrome flash on the bottom with a slight pearl hit on the bottom, and then that little bit of pink and a kind of transparent brownish back. And that's just a super natural color that matched a lot of the bait fish in that creek. And then I was connecting it to a 12-pound Seagar Tatsu. That's my, hands down, my favorite fluorocarbon line to throw. And then throwing it on an Alpha Angler Slasher. This is actually the V2 version that is coming out. May even be released by the time you are seeing this video. And then throwing it on a Daiwa Zillion SV TW in 7.1 to 1. Phenomenal jerkbait, phenomenal all-around reel, really. I love that for moving baits. Just been an awesome setup for me this week. But really, the whole key with that was fishing it fast, right? Is getting those fish to react. They were sitting there and just waiting to ambush those shad coming by. That jerkbait would come through, flashing, and they would just react. And several of my fish on day 4 actually came on that I weighed. So if I wouldn't have caught them on that, I may not have even had a shot to win. But definitely the key player this week was the X-Zone Deception Worm. If you've watched the channel for any amount of time, you know this worm has made me a lot of money. It has gave us a lot of high finishes and pulled out some key fish catches over the years. It's just a really special worm. Even though it just looks like a worm, it is so much more than that. It's built out of this really high quality plastic that floats horizontal in the water column, right? So it's sitting in the water this way. And in the back of that creek, even though those fish were anywhere from 6 inches of water to 3 foot of water, there was a lot of slime on the bottom, right? It was 80, 81 degree water temps in there by the end of the event. And kind of all that algae, nasty, slimy moss on the bottom, they didn't want to go down and eat a bait on the bottom. So I picked up on that in practice and realized how powerful this was. Like if I saw a fish, I could pitch this over there and 8 times out of 10, he was gonna swim over and he was gonna eat it. Like as soon as he saw it shaking, he was swimming over and eating it. And I think just because it gave that horizontal presentation on a drop shot up off the bottom, it was easy for them to swim over there and eat it. It sat right in their face. They didn't have to suck up any of that moss. And so it was just something that they couldn't resist. Again, putting that on a drop shot. So my hook of choice on that has been a VMC #1 Finesse Nico hook. Just pairs up really well with it. Doesn't take up too much of the bait, so you still have a lot of action, but gives you enough meat that you can get those bigger fish hooked up well. And then pairing it up with a little 1/4 ounce VMC teardrop tungsten weight. And I had about 10 to 12 inches of leader between the two. And that main line I was throwing was 10-pound Tatsu this week. A little heavier than I normally go on a drop shot, but with all the cover, the big fish that were in there, I wanted a little bit more abrasion resistance than the 8-pound that I would normally throw. And just in case I got one wrapped up in that grass or around a stump or something, I wanted just a little bit more to be able to get them out. Throwing it on my all-time favorite drop shot rod, the Alpha Angler DSR. A lot of people wondering why this one was red. The reason for this one is because not what was my favorite. One of my favorite ones that I'd won a lot of money on, right? They're all awesome, but I just have special ones that I've, had in my hand when I've had really cool fish catches or won Champlain or something. When I saved the guy at Lake Murray, he stumbled all over my rods getting back in his boat and actually broke one of my go-to DSRs. So I pulled this one out of retirement. This is the blank that we were prototyping when I told Jake that's the rod. So you guys are seeing the rod, as we were going through blanks and prototyping, trying to figure out the right action and taper and all of that. This was the one that I said, that's it. And it had red wraps because we were identifying each individual one as we were prototyping. So this is from 2016. and she's still holding on strong and almost won us another 100 grand. So this one has caught a lot of fish. And then that Daiwa Exist 3000 LT. You guys have seen this reel in many of the recaps. This is one that when I went to Japan in 2018, the crew at SLP Works built this for me and gave it to me at a Daiwa dinner. Just been through the ringer a little bit, but it is the original, exactly how they gave it to me. All the internal Exist parts are standard Exist parts, and then it just has, you know, SLP handle and spool and stuff on it. So amazing week. Crazy that it was so close to finishing out, but cannot complain. It all happens for a reason. I appreciate you guys watching. Hopefully you guys learned something. You know, the fact that I was able to make a run at the win in such a small area, you know, fish in the back of a creek that had, I guess, the right combination of bait, moving water, clean water, and it just allowed enough big fish to filter in and out of that area. I used my Mega 360 Mega Live to learn each day how I was going about that, right? I was pitching my drop shot at brim beds, stumps, laydowns, isolated grass patches, cruising fish, bedding bass, fry garters. Like, I was just using pretty much those 3 rods to rotate through whatever scenario I saw in front of me. We were able to make a run at the win. So crazy week. Appreciate you guys watching. If you guys want to pick up any of this tackle or learn more about it, make sure you guys go to midwayusa.com.